dive deep into some science-backed health hacks. We're talking all about glucose today.
Glucose, huh? You mean sugar?
Well, kind of. It's more like the fuel that powers our bodies. We're going to be looking at the work of Jessie Inchauspé.
Oh, the glucose goddess, right. I've seen her stuff online.
Exactly. She's got a great website and YouTube channel, lots of interviews, research, really fascinating. And today we're going to explore her ideas.
Sounds good. I'm all ears.
So she says managing your glucose is important for everyone.
Not just for people with diabetes.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I have to admit, I've always thought of it as, a diabetes thing.
Right, me too. But Inchauspé argues that balanced glucose is crucial for everyone. So let's start with the basics. Why is glucose such a big deal? We know it's a type of sugar. The body uses it for energy. But how does that actually make us feel good day to day?
Okay, well, you can think of it this way. Glucose is basically fuel for your cells. So when your glucose levels are constantly spiking and crashing, it's like driving your car on fumes and then slamming on the gas over and over.
Oof, yeah. Not good for the engine.
Exactly. And it's not good for your body either. It's inefficient and it wears you down.
So those mid-afternoon slumps I get, are those like mini glucose crashes?
They very well could be.
Yeah.
And Inchauspé says that the long-term effects of these spikes go way beyond just feeling tired.
Oh, no.
What else? She connects those glucose roller coasters to everything from intense cravings and messed up sleep to accelerated aging and even hormonal imbalances.
Hold on, aging, like wrinkles and gray hair?
Well, it's more than that. It's a process called glycation. Imagine a chicken roasting in the oven.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
As the chicken cooks, the proteins link with sugars and they turn brown.
Yeah.
Right? Well, the same thing happens in our bodies, just much slower.
So all slowly browning like rotisserie chickens.
Pretty much. And every time you get a glucose spike, it's like cranking up the oven temperature. It speeds up that glycation process.
Okay, that's a little scary. But is there anything we can do to like turn down the heat?
Absolutely. Inchauspé talks about loading up on antioxidants, berries, leafy greens, even dark chocolate can help protect against the damage.
Oh, I like the sound of that. So how often are these spikes happening? Is it like every time I eat?
More often than you think. Inchauspé says something like 80% of people experience glucose spikes daily.
Wow. And does it matter where the sugar is coming from? Like, is a fruit smoothie better than a donut?
Not necessarily. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter if that sugar is from a healthy fruit smoothie or a decadent piece of chocolate cake. Your body sees it all as glucose.
Seriously. So my morning smoothie could be just as bad as a donut in terms of a glucose spike.
It's all about how quickly those sugars hit your bloodstream. Some foods that seem healthy are surprisingly high on something called the glycemic index, and that means they cause rapid spikes.
Interesting. So what are some of the sneaky culprits we need to look out for?
Well, Inchauspé has this great example about grapes. She calls them pockets of sugar.
Really? Grapes?
They can send your glucose levels soaring. And white bread, rice, even that glass of orange juice you might have with breakfast can all cause these spikes.
Wow, that's surprising. I wouldn't have guessed grapes.
It's all about how those sugars are processed by your body.
Okay, so we're talking about foods that seem healthy on the surface, but are actually triggering these big glucose spikes. What happens then?
Those spikes trigger a cascade of effects on your body, starting with the tiny powerhouses inside your cells, called mitochondria.
Mitochondria. Oh, right. I vaguely remember those from high school biology. They're like the energy factories, right?
That's right. They take glucose and convert it into usable energy for your body. But when you get a sudden influx of glucose, those mitochondria can get overwhelmed. It's like flooding a power plant with too much fuel.
Ah, okay. So it can lead to malfunctions and even damage.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
All those glucose spikes are basically stressing out your mitochondria and making them less efficient at producing energy.
So that's why you might feel that crash after a sugary meal or snack.
Your mitochondria are saying, we can't keep up.
So it's not just about avoiding diabetes, it's about keeping our mitochondria healthy so they can keep us energized.
Exactly. And that's really just the beginning. Glucose spikes can impact everything from your hormones to your mental health. We'll be exploring all of that later on.
Wow, can't wait to hear more about that. But before we move on, is there anything we can actually do about these spikes?
Definitely. Inchauspé has a bunch of simple, science-backed hacks that can make a big difference.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the first one?
You might be surprised by this one, but she says the most impactful hack is starting your day with a savory breakfast.
Savory breakfast. I thought it was all about pancakes, cereal, and smoothies.
I know it sounds strange, but think about it. When you start your day with sugary cereal or pancakes, you're setting yourself up for that glucose roller coaster right from the get-go.
So instead of riding the sugar highs and lows all morning, a savory breakfast would keep things more stable.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Think eggs, avocado toast, leftover dinner, or even just a handful of nuts and some full-fat yogurt.
Okay, so leftover pizza for breakfast, is that allowed?
Trust me, your taste buds and your glucose levels will thank you.
All right, that's hack number one. Embrace the savory side. What else?
You ready for this one? It's a little unconventional.
What?
Vinegar before meals.
Vinegar, like salad dressing vinegar.
Yep. Studies actually show that consuming vinegar before a meal can reduce those glucose spikes by up to 30%.
30%, wow, that's huge. But how does that even work? Is it magic?
It's not magic, it's science. Vinegar contains acetic acid, which slows down the absorption of glucose.
Okay, so it's like putting a speed bump on the glucose highway.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. So it's not just about what we eat, but how our bodies actually process those foods.
Right. And the vinegar hack is so easy. Just dilute a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water and drink it about 10 minutes before your meal.
Okay, that's going on my shopping list. 2 hacks down. What's next?
Let's talk about veggie starters. You know how a lot of cultures start their meals with a serving of vegetables?
Yeah, my family always has a salad before our main course.
Well, there's a reason for that tradition. It turns out vegetables, especially those high in fiber, are secret weapons against glucose spikes.
Oh, how so?
That fiber creates a protective mesh in your gut that slows down the absorption of glucose from other foods.
So if I eat a big bowl of pasta on its own, it's going to spike my glucose like crazy. But if I start with a salad, that fiber helps to slow things down.
You got it.
Okay, front-loading our meals with veggies, I like it. Simple but effective. Is there one more tip to add to our glucose-busting toolkit?
One more. Movement after meals.
So we're talking about going for a walk or doing some light exercise.
Exactly. You can think of your muscles as glucose dumps. When you engage your muscles, they use up that glucose from your bloodstream for energy.
So even small movements like, I don't know, cleaning the kitchen or taking the stairs can make a difference.
Absolutely. Just incorporate more movement into your routine, especially after meals.
Wait, I can do that. These hacks are all so doable. I'm feeling really motivated.
That's great. InShusby is all about empowering people to understand their bodies and make choices that support their well-being.
But it's not just about individual action, right? I know she also talks about the bigger picture, like the toxic food landscape we live in. What are her thoughts on that?
Yeah, she definitely doesn't shy away from those bigger issues. She sees the rise in things like GLP-1 drugs for weight loss as a symptom of a broken food system.
GLP-1 drugs, those are the medications that help regulate blood sugar.
Yes, and they've become really popular for weight management. But InShusby asks a really important question. Why are these drugs even necessary? She argues it's because we're surrounded by processed foods and sugary drinks that are constantly messing with our glucose levels.
Right, it's like we're trying to fix a bullet wound with a Band-Aid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's not saying medications are bad, but she thinks we need to address the root cause of the problem. And that means making healthier choices, regulating the food industry better, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food.
This is such a crucial conversation to have. It's not just about what individuals can do, it's about creating a healthier system for everyone. But before we get into the politics of food, I'm really curious to hear more about that connection between glucose and mental health.
Absolutely.
Let's explore that more in part 2 of our deep dive. All right, so let's dig into this connection between glucose and mental health. You mentioned InShusby herself struggled with some glucose-related mental health stuff.
Yeah, she's really open about her experiences. She talks about having episodes of depersonalization.
Depersonalization, what's that?
It's like this really weird mental state where you feel disconnected from yourself and your surroundings.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense. And she thinks those episodes were related to her glucose levels.
Yeah, that's her theory. And it really highlights how powerful that mind-body connection can be.
It makes you wonder how many people out there are struggling with things like mood swings or brain fog, and it could be tied to their diet.
It's definitely something to think about. Researchers are just starting to explore this connection more deeply.
So there's still a lot we don't know, but more awareness is definitely needed. This whole deep dive is really making me rethink my relationship with food. Are there any tools that can help us track our glucose in real time?
Actually, yeah. Have you heard of continuous glucose monitors?
CGMs? I think so, but I don't know much about them.
They're these tiny devices that you wear, and they track your glucose levels all day and night.
So it's like having a window into your metabolism. That's wild.
Yeah, and Inchaspe uses CGMs to show the impact of different foods and lifestyle choices on glucose levels. She posts those graphs on Instagram, showing how things like a slice of pizza or a glass of orange juice cause spikes.
I've seen those. They're pretty eye-opening. Seeing those visual representations really brings it home.
Definitely. Visuals can be super powerful. And speaking of those spikes, remember we talked about the glycemic index of foods?
To GI, right?
Yeah. That basically tells you how quickly a food will raise your blood sugar.
So even if two foods have the same amount of sugar, the one with a higher GI will cause a faster, more dramatic spike.
Exactly. That's why even something like oatmeal, which is considered a healthy breakfast option, might spike your glucose more than you'd expect.
Okay, so paying attention to the GI is key. But what else can we do to minimize those spikes?
Well, those veggie starters we talked about, they're not just a good source of fiber, they can actually lower the overall GI of a meal.
Right, because the fiber slows down the absorption of glucose.
Exactly. In fact, Inchaspe takes that idea a step further with her food order hack.
A food order hack. I'm listening.
She suggests eating your foods in a specific order to minimize those spikes. You start with fiber-rich vegetables like a salad or some cooked greens. Then you move on to protein and healthy fats. And finally, you eat your carbs and starches last.
So we're basically layering our meals to create a slow and steady release of glucose.
Exactly. It's a simple tweak, but it can make a big difference.
Love it. It's all about working with our bodies, not against them.
Yeah.
Speaking of working with our bodies, you mentioned vinegar can help reduce visceral fat.
Did I? Well, yes, it's true.
That's the dangerous fat that surrounds our organs.
Yep, and it's linked to all sorts of health problems like heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
Not good.
But the great thing is that vinegar has been shown to actually help reduce that visceral fat accumulation.
So not only can it help stabilize our glucose levels, but it can also help us trim that dangerous belly fat.
It's a win-win.
I'm sold. You know, it's amazing how interconnected everything is. We've talked about food, exercise, now I'm thinking about sleep. How does that factor into the glucose equation?
Sleep. So crucial for everything. And you know what? It's totally intertwined with our glucose levels.
So those late night snacking sessions might be doing double damage?
It's definitely possible. Think about it. You eat something that causes a big glucose spike, then you go to bed. Your body's working overtime to regulate those levels while you're trying to sleep.
Not exactly a recipe for restful slumber. And then when we're sleep deprived, we crave more sugary, high-carb foods, which just perpetuates the cycle.
Exactly. It's this vicious cycle.
Mm.
But the good news is that prioritizing sleep can actually help improve your glucose control.
So getting enough sleep helps us manage our glucose, and managing our glucose helps us sleep better. It's all connected.
Exactly. And speaking of things that help us manage glucose, let's not forget about exercise.
Right. Exercise is like a magic bullet for so many things, and it plays a key role in regulating our glucose as well.
Remember we talked about those glucose dumps? When you use your muscles, they soak up glucose from the bloodstream for energy.
So a good workout can actually help lower those post-meal glucose spikes.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Even a brisk walk or some light gardening can make a difference.
Okay, good to know. It's all about finding ways to move our bodies more throughout the day.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a chore. Find activities you enjoy and make them a regular part of your routine.
I love that. It's about enjoying the process, not punishing ourselves. And all these healthy habits, eating well, moving our bodies, getting enough sleep, they all work together to create a more balanced and vibrant life.
That's exactly what Inchaspe emphasizes. It's not about deprivation or restriction. It's about making sustainable changes that you can stick with.
And understanding glucose seems to be a key part of that. But what about people who might need extra support? We mentioned GLP-1 drugs earlier, which are often prescribed for type 2 diabetes and for weight management. What's Inchaspe's take on those?
It's a good question. While these medications can be really helpful for some people, she raises some interesting points. She views the widespread use of those drugs as kind of a band-aid solution for a bigger problem.
Right. It's like we're trying to medicate our way out of a problem that stems from our food system.
Exactly. She's not saying medication is bad, but she thinks it's important to also address the underlying causes of those issues. That means making conscious food choices, but also advocating for a healthier food environment, supporting policies that make healthy food more accessible for everyone.
This is such a complex issue, but it's definitely something we need to be talking about more. It's not just about individual responsibility, it's also about collective action and systemic change.
Totally agree. And Inchaspy is doing a great job of raising awareness about these issues and empowering people to take control of their health.
I love that idea of becoming glucose detectives, paying
Yeah.
attention to our bodies and figuring out what works for us.
Yeah, it's about tuning into those subtle cues, energy dips, cravings, mood swings, and understanding how they relate to your glucose levels.
Becoming more in tune with our inner landscape. It's fascinating. Before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to hear more about the role of mindset. Can our thoughts and beliefs actually impact our glucose levels?
That's a great segue into the final part of our exploration. We'll dive into that next, exploring the power of mindset and how our emotions can influence our metabolic health.
All right, we're back for the final part of our glucose deep dive.
It's amazing how much we've learned about this tiny molecule.
I know, right? It's like glucose is this hidden puppet master controlling so much more than we realize.
The more we understand, the more we can take charge of our health.
Absolutely. It's not about being a victim to cravings or genetics. It's about knowing the science and making smart choices.
And speaking of choices, you mentioned wanting to talk about mindset.
Yes, we talked
Yeah.
about food, exercise, sleep. But what about your thoughts? Can our mindset actually affect our glucose levels?
That's a great question. The research is still pretty new, but it does look like our thoughts and emotions can really impact our metabolic health.
So if I'm stressed or anxious, that could actually make my glucose spike.
It's definitely possible. When we're stressed, our bodies release hormones like
Mm.
cortisol, right?
Right.
Well, those can tell the liver to release stored glucose into your bloodstream.
So it's like our bodies are preparing us to run from a tiger, even if we're just stressed about work or traffic.
Exactly. And for our ancestors, that stress response was super helpful. But these days, we're constantly stressed, so it can mean chronically high glucose levels.
Makes sense. So managing stress isn't just about feeling calmer, it's about protecting our metabolic health too.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to manage stress. Mindfulness, meditation, exercise.